Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Sarah Martin with The Contoured Chemist. It's another giveaway day, guys. I'm excited. This one is always one of my most popular giveaways. I wonder if you can guess what it is. Oh my gosh, I can't grab them all with one hand. Today is brush collection. And not just the brush collection you can buy, actually every 3D brush. So there's 10. It's a lot. This is a big one. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about brushes and some troubleshooting, some tips, what I recommend each brush for, and how to kind of customize your look depending on the brush choice, because I'm asked every day what I recommend. And after 5 years of being an artist, I see a lot of the issues that people have is a lot to do with brush choice. So we're going to kind of talk about how to avoid those today. And we're going to do one of the recreate the looks as I put on my face as we use each brush. Can you guess which one I'm gonna do? My shirt decided what we're gonna do to see how it turns out. If you wanna check it out, please keep watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and thanks for being here. So we're gonna go ahead and do the look. Can you guess? Maybe you'll see. Oh, a pop of green. Yeah. We're gonna do Frosted Pine, one of the new holiday recreate the looks, in my own way. And we're gonna talk about each brush as I put on my face. And I'm going to share my recommendations for how to use the brushes. Now, this is just from my personal experience, what I have seen throughout the years of being an artist, what I troubleshoot the most, and what I have discovered from experimenting with these brushes the most. All right, there are 6 face brushes, what I would consider for the face, and there are 4 eye brushes, which some of these can be used as the face as well, but I'm gonna kind of show you my tips and tricks for them. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I would say is I recommend 2 brushes to get started with, if at all possible. The reason why is because of how our brushes pick up product. So you have probably heard me say before that one of the main things people run into if they don't really hear it before they try the makeup is that they just try to apply way too much. I've done it. I'm sure you've done it. We've all done it. And so I stress it because it's so easily avoidable. Why troubleshoot an issue if you don't have to? You just got to know a few things. And one of the things is our brushes all pick up differently. How you pick it up in the 10 with the brush makes a difference. And so I want to kind of show you method and what it looks like when you're picking it up different ways, how that actually gets deposited to your face. So we're going to go ahead and start with what is probably the top seller of all the brushes. And that is a good reason. It's because it's one brush that is recommended if you want to just pick up one brush to do it all. Now, if I had to pick one brush only with my palette to travel with, I could definitely do my full face with this brush. As long as I had my perfector. I will be honest, I will never use this brush if I don't have my perfector. It wouldn't be pretty and I wouldn't like it. So this brush is the 3D brush. It was the original. It's designed to apply highlight with the pointed end and contour with this round end. But I'm always very transparent with you guys. It is my least favorite brush. It is the only brush I don't use on a daily basis. And that's saying something. I have all of them. In fact, I have multiples. I use 2 blush and bronzers every day. I sometimes don't use the buff brush, but when it comes to blush, bronzer, blend brush, detail brush, these 3 are my ride or dies. I always use 2 multitaskers as well. all of the eye brushes are a daily necessity as well. But this brush barely ever finds it in my rotation unless I am showing you guys how to use it. And the main reason why is because it can cause so many issues if you're using it in the way I see a lot of people show it. And I don't recommend it. Or you're gonna come back to me and say that my face feels sticky. I feel like I'm wearing a mask. It feels so thick. And those things can happen also if you're color matched wrong, but for the most part, it's this brush. So I'm just gonna show you real quickly. If you've seen this brush used on social media, this is what you usually see. Pointed ends for highlight, you see somebody swipe in with their creams and swipe onto their face. This is how it looks. That swipe, literally, can you see the chunks of highlight? Chunks, literal chunks on it. And I didn't even, I mean, I guarantee you I could get even more product to come off the brush because usually people are doing this, swiping it on. Thick, uneven application. This is gonna require a lot of blending and spreading around. I'm telling you that much. I could probably do half of my face with. How are you gonna spread that around unless you're swiping? And if you've seen my videos before, I always say swipe or no swiping. No swiping with this makeup. For one, if you have mature skin, it's never gonna look pretty. It's going to streak usually. It's gonna give less coverage. Way harder to blend that way. And this brush in and of itself is just kind of hard to blend with. It's kind of, this tip kind of flops around, and I see people who haven't been shown how to use this brush using this brush very differently than I would ever recommend. And it's because I've tried for years to figure out what the best way to use this brush is. So if you have this brush and you really want to use it, or you want to have a full face just with one brush, I get it. Don't use this end for your main highlight. Use this end. This end is much more similar to this end of the blush and bronzer, which is what I recommend for beginners. Don't swipe in. Tap. Then when you go to the face, buff to distribute the product. Now, since I had just swiped in to that cream, it's super gooey now. So of course it picked up a lot more than it normally would, but I think you get the picture as much as you possibly can from a white sheet of paper, right? So when I recommend this brush, I recommend the round end, whether you are color correcting and need to touch your color corrector and buff it onto those areas, and then go into your main and press it on over to kind of stay matching and to build up coverage. Then I would recommend contouring with this end, which is what it's designed for, squishing this kind of brush down a little bit so it's not so fat. If it's used more like this, when it's rounded, it will make a really large spot on your cheek, right? But if you squeeze it and kind of make it, let's be honest, a little bit closer to the kind of size of the detail brush, you can really get up under that cheekbone a lot better and get better application. Then you can use this end for your brightener, and I still don't recommend swiping. Then you can tap. Now with this brush, if you tap in gently without much pressure, then you tap on and do this kind of feather-like stroke, you can place the product and blend it out so it's not thick and chunky and causing a lot of texture issues. Do you see the concentration of how sheared out that can be versus how dark this is? This is all the same color, okay? So if somebody comes to me and they're like, oh, my shade is it's so orange or yellow or something, and I know I color match them, and I ask you, what brush are you using? A lot of times it's because you're using a brush, it's picking up too much product, it's depositing so much product, it's literally making that shade pull a color that it's not even. Like, this shade is actually neutral, so when you tell me it's pulling orange, I know you're applying way too much of the shade. Does that make sense? Since these creams are so pigmented, the concentration is very differently than how you would apply a traditional foundation. You have to use it in a very sheared out method, and using less is way more. And that's how we can get away with using a shade too dark to color correct and still stay matching when we're done. It's those combination of shades. So a lot of times when I'm asking, what brush are you using or how are you using it, the motion of the brush is just as important. If you're telling me you're doing this with this pointed end, you're never gonna get it to be buffed out in this thin layer. Certain ends are good for buffing motion, certain brushes are good for the pressing motion, and some are not. So this one needs to be pressed on only. Don't swipe, don't flick back and forth, just don't swipe into your creams. There's no need to swipe into any creams but the cream illuminator. It's the only thing I ever swipe into, and I swipe in with my perfector. That's it. Everything else, you're gonna pick up way too much product if you're swiping in. Everything else, I promise you. Okay, so the round end of the 3D brush can be buffed or pressed, okay? And for contour, you can press it on and press to blend, just like you can with the detail, okay? You just have to be careful with kind of how your brush is squished. This is better for blush placement and kind of making it a little bit more narrow is best for contour. So this brush can be used for everything, okay? You can use it to color correct, main shade, blush, contour, brightener. And it can do a full face. Bronzer is a little bit trickier unless you aren't color correcting. Then you can use this end to kind of place your bronzer and buff it to blend it. I don't recommend that method for anyone color correcting like me. You're gonna move all of your colors around and you're not gonna get good coverage. So if that is the case and you wanna use a bronzer with the 3D brush, I would pick up the perfector to apply that illuminator and to use this pointed end for your illuminator after you've removed excess, of course, since this brush, even though you can use it similarly to some of the other brushes, this is much more dense than this, and so you're still gonna be picking up more product, okay? So I would say this brush is gonna give you probably more medium coverage. Okay? So then use your perfector, remove excess, use the pointed end to swipe in to press on your illuminator, use the butt end to tap into your bronzer, and then press it on, okay? That way we're not moving anything around. And you can still have one brush and your perfector, okay? Does that make sense? I'm gonna go ahead and pick up the second of my least used brushes, just because I feel like they are the most similar, okay? And this one is the Buff brush, okay? Used to be called the Buffy. It is a very dense brush, pretty much has two sides. This one's smaller, this one's larger. This is the brush I would say I would recommend for full coverage, ladies, but not until after you've used the product a while. I still recommend these two for the beginner. This one can still give you full coverage depending on how you use it, but you're gonna learn how much to apply. And if you go straight to this brush, you're probably not gonna like it because you're gonna try to apply one thick layer, because this brush also picks up a lot of product. Because it's so dense and because of the angle, again, people swipe in. They just do that motion, okay? Let's compare, okay? And they tend to swipe as well, okay? Now, I do feel like this brush can be used, but no matter how I use it, it always tends to be on the more medium to full coverage side. So when I do recommend using it, I recommend tapping gently because it picks up so much. And then we're gonna go in and we're gonna press, okay? When we're doing the same kind of press and feather motion that we did with this pointed end, okay? That is how I recommend using it in order to get it to blend while you're pressing it on, okay? So for years, this was my ride or die, this small end for pressing on under my eyes. It does give a more full coverage look under my eyes, and lately I've just been into a little bit more natural, showing a little bit more color, less heavy. I'm older, what can I say? So I do like it for that. Or if I want a full coverage day, I still will pick up this brush, buff on my color corrector, and then I would use this and I would press on my main shade on the large end. Now, this brush is more time consuming because you got to think you are pressing it and doing this motion across your entire face. It's going to take more time. This covers less surface area than this brush, okay, which is the blush end, okay? So usually when I want full coverage, my medium coverage is enough for me, and I just use this brush to press on my main shade, and I just pick up more in order to get more coverage. All of these brushes can give you a variety of coverages depending on how you use them. This will just pick up more at a time, but you're gonna have to work a little bit longer to press it around. This one won't pick up as much product, so you're just gonna have to go back in and pick up a little bit more, but you're gonna be able to press it on probably a little bit faster. So you can use either to give a similar look. So some people also like this to contour because they can kind of press it along that. I'll be honest, I never use it for contour. For me, it's harder to blend out in the way that I apply contour, but some people really like it for contour as well. And also, this is a brush that you have to press and flick. It doesn't buff well. I don't know why it's called the buff. I will be honest. I did not name it. It doesn't buff well, in my opinion. It doesn't, it reminds me of this pointed end and the fact that it kind of like turns over on itself. If you do it in your hand, you can kind of feel the motion now. It doesn't, it's like the bristles kind of go back. It just doesn't buff well, okay? So I have certain brushes that I recommend for the buffing motion, and that's gonna be this round end of the 3D, but most likely it's gonna be this end of the blush bronzer. This is my choice for every beginner because it doesn't pick up as much. If you compare the ends, okay, this is the 3D. This one is round all the way around. It's something about the way this is curved that you get product in the middle, not so much on the sides. And so when you're buffing those, it's not as dense also as this brush, okay? And so as you're buffing, it's like these side bristles are also moving that product for you really easily, as to where you're not having to do much work. And it's not so dense that it's picking up a ton when you touch your creams. So it's a magical end, I'll be honest, just because like I didn't use it for years because I'm like, it's a blush brush. Why would I use it for foundation? And then we started using it for mature skin and realized how amazing it is for mature skin to give a nice airbrush look without pulling or tugging at looser skin that we get, you know? And because it's like, it's one of the softest, least dense brushes. Now it's still dense. It's still designed for creams, which all of our brushes are, and a lot on the market are not. So if you're using a brush that isn't a Seint brush and having issues, that's probably your #1 reason. I've seen it time and time again when people switch to our brushes and they say, okay, now I get it. It's a game changer when you have the right brush. And truly it can be just the wrong brush within our line that you're trying to use as well, because it depends on the look you're wanting and what you're using it for. Like I said, the motion of how you're using it, all of these things can make your application easier or harder, in my opinion, okay? So like I said, I use 2 of these every day. Maybe that makes me a little bougie, but I am lazy and this one's really stained because I always use this one for lip and cheek, for blush. This one is, I use this every day for my highlights, so might as well have 2, right? So I think one of the reasons why this doesn't seem to be as big of an issue is because this brush is pretty wide. People aren't really prone to sweeping in and swiping with this brush. I'm not sure why, but people just, maybe the shape of it doesn't lend to swiping. People aren't swiping on their face with this brush as much. It kind of seems like it's a brush more for this motion, especially when you try it on your face and you feel it. So if you tap in and then you can see how easily that kind of buffs out onto a large surface area. So I'll be honest, one of the reasons why I like this brush is because I'm lazy. I want to do my makeup as fast as I can. And this brush allows me to really like color correct quickly. So if you're using a color corrector like I do on a large surface area of your face, a large portion of your face, this is going to cut your application time in half. Because yes, you can use a brush like this, but this one is going to take you longer and you're going to be picking up more product. I'm going to go ahead and use this brush to do my color corrector. So this is my color corrector. I'm simply going to touch it and then I'm going to just buff it on that area. Easy peasy. And now, since I've been swiping in this one is super easy to get to come off on the brush, but this one is a little bit drier. I'll be honest, I like it when my creams dry out a little bit because it kind of helps me not over apply. Some people really like when they're fresh and creamy. You can always drop them on the stove and melt them back down, stir them with a toothpick. They'll be like brand new again. And around this time of the year when it is cold outside, maybe colder in your home, drier from the heat coming on, your skin is drier, they might not spread as easily. If you don't know, our creams are a little bit more tacky than creamy. They're not as creamy as even our lip and cheeks. Our highlights aren't designed that way. So if you have to, and you're struggling with some of your colors being a little bit dry, you can just kind of warm it up with the warmth of your finger, or you can, I already did that area, kind of tap it on, kind of just barely tap. I'm barely touching, but you can kind of tap it on areas of your face. And maybe do your eye makeup, maybe put on your eyeshadow primer like that. Give it a few minutes because the warmth of your skin will cause those creams to warm up naturally so that you can blend them out easier. I even have some clients that kind of take a hairdryer and blast their creams for a second. It won't take long, just to warm them up slightly so that they spread more easily. It can honestly depend on your climate as well. If you live in more humid or dry climate, it can affect the way your creams are during different seasons. Okay, so once they've kind of warmed up, then same thing, buff it on. Because our goal with that color corrector is the thinnest layer possible, right? We don't want this thick, chunky layer, or by the time we finish our makeup, we're gonna feel heavy, cakey. Ugh, we're not gonna like it, right? So I've kind of discovered that although I love this brush for my initial kind of base, and that really thin layer. I tend to like also a more detailed brush to get into smaller areas. So if you are using a color corrector on your full face, I'd recommend a brush like this that can buff it onto a large surface area. If you are just color correcting certain parts of your face, like your under eyes, around your nose, maybe just your chin or some spots of hyperpigmentation, something like that, I'd recommend one of these more detailed brushes. Now, I like both of these because they're both dense, again, made for creams, and you can use them to kind of press on product or buff it in. So if you're finding that like you're putting it on and kind of letting it heat up, but you're still not going onto the skin well, make sure you aren't just pressing only, make sure you're buffing that into the skin. So this motion will do a lot more than just pressing it, which sometimes just can, pressing it will give you more coverage. So it's gonna stay in place exactly where you put it more. And so sometimes that doesn't blend it very well. It's gonna kind of build up that coverage right in that one spot. Does that make sense? So the detail has a smaller end and so does the blend brush. They're very similar. The blend brush is a little bit more flat and wider, and the detail is a little bit more pointed and tapered. I use them both the same way and I can't see a difference, to be honest. Lately, I've been picking up the blend brush. So I'm gonna kind of show you over here what that looks like. If you just kind of, again, don't swipe, tap, tap, tap. Then when you're blending in a smaller area, it's still dense enough to deposit that without it pulling you orange or pulling you yellow, whatever the case may be. So for me, I always hit this small area where this brush can't really get. Like I tend to, if I do use this brush there, like I can see where I didn't fully cover my broken capillaries. So I will go in with this brush and I will buff that on that smaller area. Same thing goes for my eyelids, which are naturally have a lot of veins, and I can't really hit it with this brush. But if you're using one of these, one of the smaller ends can work. Again, just be careful because it's really hard to not, it's really easy to just want to swipe and not get adequate coverage from swiping on the product. Okay, so I kind of just tap it and do that feather motion so that I'm getting a really thin layer. Now the inside corners, I try to pick it up on the very end of the brush so I can press it on and then buff it. Okay, so that area of my eyes don't move, you know, it is not very loose in there. Now the under eyes are a different story. So I'm gonna tap in gently and I'm going to start pressing and tapping. This can be an area that's hard to blend out since if you look, if you try to buff, it moves if you have mature eyes like I do. Okay, so I kind of gently, that's why you have to use very little product around your eyes. If you're applying too much, you'll never be able to blend it out by just simply tapping if you have loose skin there. This is why I don't do the dot method. I can't control how much product I have. So I'm gonna go back in with some. I like to be able to just tap and control the amount. Okay, once you have that kind of base and you feel like you got good coverage, you've buffed it on, I always recommend going in and pressing on more where you need more coverage. Again, pick a brush that presses on well and just pick one that matches the size of the area. So if you have a larger area, you wanna, you know, not spend as much time, pick up the blush brush or that detailed brush. So dark spots, under eyes, redness. Now, say I had blemishes. This isn't the best brush to like press on for a blemish, right? You really want to pick a brush that matches the size. The Multitasker, like I said, I always have two of. I always have one for eyes and one for lips. And I use this end for my face. And I always color correct with this tiny end if I have a blemish. It works really well for dark spots. Anything that requires a lot of detail, I would recommend the Multitasker. Multitasker works for literally everything from brows, eyeliner, face, lips, liner, eyeshadow, lipstick. It can do it all. Okay, so the other end of the blend brush. So this brush was originally designed for powder illuminator, which I'll show you in a little bit. This end will give the most natural coverage of any of our brushes. So I use it a lot in the summer when I want a really skin-like finish. I will color correct with my normal color corrector, and I will just go in with this with my main shade because it picks up very, very little. Just enough to kind of tone it down, keep me matching, and then I'll switch back to this side to brighten under the eyes. So this brush, I really love for the most natural look. So if you are, say, just wanting super natural coverage, but you want to contour, I would say these two will be your best friends. This one for contouring. This one I don't like to contour with for multiple reasons, but this side gives way too much of a harsh stripe. This side is too floppy. It doesn't blend. This is not really the best brush for buffing because it's, again, look at it, the way it collapses on itself. So when I use it for main shade, I kind of tap very gently. You'll notice when you pick up product, let's say I'm just gonna tap in, tap, tap, tap. And then you tap on the skin. You see how very little that picks up and lays down? And it doesn't really move around much. Like, you can't really blend that out too much. It just pretty much puts a really thin wash over whatever you're using it on. Okay, so that is the blend brush. Natural coverage, great for detail work. Pick back up the blush brush again because I'm gonna go with my main shade. And I don't want a super natural look. I'm gonna go a little bit more medium coverage so I can show you guys. But you can also just kind of tailor it to your face or what you need or what you want that day. So let's say I did want really natural as I could get in non-problem areas. So that's pretty much just my jawline, if I want to be honest. So let's see, I'm just gonna tap into my main shade, and I'm just gonna press this along the jawline, mostly to keep me matching my neck. Okay, it's still gonna kind of even out because I still have freckles and hyperpigmentation there, but I don't have a lot of redness, a lot of dark spots like the rest of my face that I need a little bit more coverage on. So say I'm just gonna use this around my mouth, keep it really nice and natural, maybe even on my forehead, because I don't tend to color correct too much there either. So just enough to kind of keep me matching. But then my problem areas are mainly my nose is darker. I've got redness, hyperpigmentation there and across my entire mask area, and hyperpigmentation along my contour line. So then I'm gonna go in with this brush on that area to give me a little bit more coverage where I need it. Just gonna tap in once because, well, for one, I've been swiping in this color so many times that it is like so creamy right now. It's picking up a lot more. And I'm just gonna kind of tap, okay? Again, this is a great brush for pressing. It is amazing to press on to build up coverage, which is the only way you're gonna get good coverage with this makeup is to slowly build up in thin layers by pressing on more product. So we're just gonna press that on, one tap, okay, and it's gonna give me way more coverage on this center part of my face. Same thing for the nose. Now, since my nose again has all those little nooks and crannies, I'm gonna pick back up the small end of that brush and just make sure I don't miss any, because I have a lot of dark spots there. Okay, and then I'm gonna go in under the eyes to build up coverage where needed there as well. And you can probably tell I got some good coverage going on. I got medium to full coverage easily. And if I wanted it a little bit more so, I would just go back in with this brush and press on a little bit more. In my opinion, it's faster than picking up the buff, although this will give you more full coverage in my opinion. Hey, finally, it's time for my favorite brush, the detail. When I first started wearing this makeup, I did my full face with this brush. It wasn't as pretty, but you can do it. This is a great example of a brush that doesn't look like you would expect it to. Like, you wouldn't think that this brush buffed so well, but I'm telling you, it's because these bristles are really stiff and dense. This brush really does buff. So you can buff on a really thin layer or use this for your color corrector. It does buff well. You would think that it would press on really well, but it doesn't press the best. I feel like sometimes it even pokes me a little. It feels pokey if I use it in that manner. So I don't recommend it for that. I only use this end now for contour. It's the only brush I will contour with. I try other brushes for demonstration purposes, and I never like the way my contour looks. I'm a little picky after all these years of what my contour looks like. So this one, I can control exactly how it's gonna look every time. So I stick with it, okay? So it has this really straight edge, meaning the main difference between these two is that this is gonna give a much more diffused contour. This is gonna give a much more defined contour, okay? I like defined at this point, so I'm gonna stick with it. I hold it at an angle, tap, 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 okay? Always tapping into my creams. And the contours are much drier, so I tap in with a little bit more pressure than I normally do with the highlights, okay? Then when I press it on, easy peasy, all I do is press right along that line, and I just keep pressing to pretty much apply and contour, and contour. Of course I'm contouring. Apply and blend at the same time. Okay, and so I'm just slowly kind of moving it up. Now, I don't want to do this because I just color corrected everything under there. So again, depending on your face, your concerns will also depend on brush choices, because if you can buff on everything because you don't have anything that you're working on getting extra coverage on, you have a lot more choices than I have to press on everything after that first initial corrector in order to not uncover what I just covered. Does that make sense? So I have to make sure the brushes I'm choosing are easily able to tap that on like that. So I'm pressing at an angle so that I'm kind of cupping that cheekbone. And then as I keep pressing upwards, it's blending more so than applying at that point. Does that make sense? I think I've said, does that make sense like 100 times, like you guys can answer me. Hopefully it makes sense. Okay, and I totally need to blend that. So I go back to my trusty blush end and just press. Just press it. This is why having two brushes so much better than one, because you have highlight on this one, contour on this one. You're never muddying up your colors. As long as you're not doing this and getting so much product on one brush, you can use one brush for all of it and you are not gonna see a lot of mixing. But if you have a lot of product left over on your brush and then you try to dip into something else, that's a different story. I am getting so very little product on the brush anyway that now my brush is actually clean. It doesn't have excess highlight on it. This is mainly just stained at this point. It's not depositing. It's not depositing more color, okay? All it is doing is like blending, okay? So blending. Where you have to worry about the mixing is if you are swiping in and then putting it on and being like, oh, I still have more on my brush, because you're picking up too much in the first place. Okay, forehead, I'm gonna press this on, push up to blend, down to blend. When it comes to foreheads, I feel like you could literally use any of these brushes. It doesn't have to be strategic, but I just tend to like to use, I use one brush for all my contouring, you know? But this round end of the 3D does actually blend really well if you're needing a brush to help you blend out. You gotta just think, the denser the brush, the easier it will blend. So something like this, they blend super well. Something like this is more like diffusing. So like if my contour was too harsh, I would just simply press along that line. It will diffuse the line. Something like this is better for that whole press and pull motion, the feather-like motion that I was talking about. Move the color to a place that you want it. This isn't going to be moving color. It's just going to soften, whereas something like this is going to help you distribute that product without you having to do this motion, which typically just blends everything together to where you can't see any distinction anymore. Sometimes when clients come to me and they're like, I don't feel like I have that three-dimensional look, it's because they're doing like finger paint method. They're blending everything together to where they're almost all merging so much you see no distinction between where your highlight and where your contour is. And you just need to be a little bit more strategic with application and, you know, not over blend your contour. Like place it right where you want it, so that way when you're blending it, it stays, and you have to do very little blending and disappear. Okay, I'm trying to remember which brushes we've done. Let's finish up the blush bronzer brush and bronze it up a little bit. Okay, so I have two in here. I got my Bella and Glow Illuminator because I like to swirl into both. Now, this is definitely a brush that if you, let's see, I think my Bella is pretty dry, but if I kind of warm it up with the fingers, maybe I can show you guys. When Bella is brand new, it's super creamy, and I get all the time where people are like, oh, it's too dark, or it looks patchy, or something like that. And you guys, that is all on just how you're getting on the brush. If you dip straight into a brand new bronzer, and then you go straight to the face, you're gonna get, and see, this one's pretty dried out, so it's not even that bad. Okay, I got off that top layer. Now, when I dip in one time and touch my face, I'm getting all these like more concentrated deposits of pigment, right? But if you, now that my bronzer is super creamy, if you gently touch and swirl to where you're just getting a wash across the entire brush, and then you swirl on the face or tap on the face, which I just deposit all the color. I tend to just kind of tap gently. You're gonna get a nice bronzed look wherever you deposit the color. So how you use the brush is important. How you dip in is so important, okay? Even if your bronzer is really new. I actually prefer it when it gets really kind of dried out, because then I can swirl in a lot more and not have to worry at all. And then I can kind of really swirl into my glow too. And then you guys, I just tap. And that way when I tap, it's not giving me one dark spot here where then I'm like, crap, I gotta grab a brush that's more dense so I can blend that out, and then I lose coverage wherever I'm blending it, because I'm a color corrector, you know? So I'm just gonna tap that where I want it. And it also lets you really control how much bronzer. Like if you put too much bronzer on and you have to try to blend it out, and then suddenly you're like, oh, I look too dark, I look too warm, I look orange. That's just because you didn't slowly build up the color. So I like to slowly build up color. I feel like Bella is extremely universal. A little goes a long way. Do you see that? I mean, I barely swirled in. And you can just tap it only where you need it. And all it does is just kind of give you that warm glow. Or you can use it down the neck and it's not gonna look patchy as long as you're swirling in. And I swirl on my neck because I didn't color correct there, you know? So, depends on your concerns and your face. Okay, I finally went over the whole brush. Oh, just kidding. I'm gonna pick up this one and I'm gonna do lip and cheek here in a second. Let's go ahead and brighten real quick. Maybe I should contour my nose so I can show you guys the full effect. So again, one of the reasons why I love the detail is because it has this straight edge and I can contour my nose super quickly just by kind of wiggling in that edge and giving myself a nice little line. Takes 2 seconds, wiggle, line up. And then I usually, again, use this end of the detail brush because usually this one's covered in contour. So then I kind of dip into this and I kind of just help that line go up and I kind of help blend it down a little bit too. And I just use this whole brush for contour. I do the end and then under the bottom lip to pout that. And there you go. So that is the whole detail brush, contour and contour. And now I can go ahead and brighten and I go back to the blend brush, which was fully for highlight. So I'm gonna use my lightest, and this one is very dry because it's probably been in this compact for a year. That's how very little brightener I use now. So I did used to use this one. Let's see if I can show you guys real quick. I would tap, tap, but when you tap on, do you see how much more product that deposits right there? Okay, it is much more full coverage, even by tapping. And tapping kind of, it will build up more coverage. So if you really want more coverage in certain areas, this brush can do it. Okay, so in comparison, I'm gonna use this brush and tap, 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 and then I'm gonna go in. I mean, it's a huge difference, okay? If you're struggling with texture and under eyes, and it's a matter of like you have more mature eyes like I do, and you gotta remember, the lighter you go with your highlight, the more it's gonna emphasize texture. The more product you put on that area, the more it's gonna emphasize texture. The more you haven't color corrected under it and are putting a shade too light on an area that's darker, it's gonna increase texture. So in order to kind of mitigate that, use less product, strategically, avoid under the eye, concentrate on those areas without as much texture and just that high point of the cheekbone. And you're still gonna get the same brightening effect, but you're not going to have as much creasing and texture issues. Okay, so I feel like less is more. Demi taught me that. And now I don't use as much brightener as I did in years past. Same thing goes with here. I used to apply a lot more right there, but that's a place of texture on a lot of people. This area as well. So I just avoid those areas and just place it strategically. And it's so much easier that way. Okay, so this giveaway does not include a perfector. I know it's in one of the other ones. I can't remember. You have to go over to Instagram and check it out if you want to enter all 12 days. But the perfector to me is a non-negotiable when it comes to application. It's the only thing that will remove excess, especially if you're like wanting like a side like this with more full coverage. This is going to crease on me in probably a few minutes. So I'm going to concentrate on removing excess in that area. So just press and kind of bounce it across your entire face. So I concentrate anywhere I tend to crease, anywhere it looks too heavy, anywhere I need to maybe blur lines. And then I'm constantly rotating to a new cool area of the sponge to keep picking up. There you go. It's magical. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and skip blush for a second because I gotta powder immediately, or I'm gonna have creasing. And I just dropped my brush into the creams. That's okay. The powder brush, I never do my makeup without it, and I only use it for powder. This end is my favorite because it's like the first brush I ever used that really controlled placement of powder. And I want to look younger. I don't want to put a bunch of heavy loose powder on, and a matte look is not my favorite. I want that youthful dewy glow, but I don't want to worry about tapping out my under eyes through the day because they crease because I never stop blinking and I have a lot of texture there. So this brush allows me to touch my powder, control exactly how much, and I just tap it on, okay? It works really well for oily girls too, because say your forehead's oily, you can almost like press it into the pores to kind of keep that oil at bay through the day, where it's not gonna make you as shiny. And with any powder, the more you apply, the more it's gonna age you and make your skin look dry and emphasize texture and wrinkles. So I like to control exactly how much I use. So I'm gonna go ahead and tap on anywhere I might crease. I wanna kind of mattify a little bit. And then I go in more generously for my eyelids, which also crease and are the oiliest part of my face. So in order for me to get a good eyeshadow that will last all day, I have to really apply more to my eyelids. Now, this brush, this kabuki end, was actually designed for blush. So I do really like it because you could just tap in and then press it right on. Obviously, this brush is my second favorite ever, so I tend to just use this one since she's well loved. Okay, we finally got to the Frosted Pine look, and the lip and cheek is Tropicana, which is one of my faves. So I'm just going to tap in and then tap on. Such a pretty color. And I feel like people think this is just like a summer shade, but it's not. It's beautiful year-round. Okay, I'm finally done using that brush. The last of the face brushes, I'm gonna pick back up the blend brush because this one has Goldie illuminator, which is a powder illuminator. So I normally use that Perfector with my cream, but this brush was originally designed for powder illuminators. Now, I will warn you, this color is a little dark for me. I'm gonna use it very sparingly. And if you take this brush and swipe in, just like the rest of them, if you swipe into a powder, if you don't know, our powders are very pigmented and they make great eyeshadows because they're just so shimmery, okay? So they're more of the wet looking highlight as far as if you're comparing our creams and powders, they're gonna give you much more of that wow factor. So that being said, I'm just gonna gently tap off excess, and then I'm going to barely touch because this shade's a little dark, like I said, for me. And it's very gold and it looks amazing on darker skin tones. And I'm kind of borderline. And I can use it as long as I don't apply it too heavily or it will look too stark on my skin tone. Okay. And if you do get too much, just pick up your Perfector and I feel like this will blend it out a little bit as well. Like sometimes I get too far in. Once again, I talk too much on just face brushes like always. So let's do this quick eye look. And first of all, I'm going to do my lips because I feel like they're blank right now. I'm gonna use my contour to line my lips. So Astoria. Oh yeah, and this is the Multitasker. The only thing I ever line my lips with. I've used both ends, but I like to just keep this one just for lips. So I use it in my contour or our suede lip liner. And then I use the same brush to apply the lip and cheek. Okay, so you can kind of wipe off excess on a towel if you need to, and then pick up the product. If you use the Multitasker for a lip color, it's just gonna deposit it more pigmented on your lips. So otherwise, you can always use your finger. I do that a lot too. The darker or more dramatic the lip color, the more likely I am to use the brush to apply it. Okay, there you go. Tropicana. Now we can, and I showed you the small end already for the face, so that brush is done. I'm gonna go ahead and do my brows. So the line brush is the only brush I use for my brows. It's got this small tapered angle end. It can do brow hairs. It has the spoolie to brush them through, and you can also use the spoolie for the brow wax to hold them in place. So for my brows, I'm pretty simple. All I do is I use my Trust eyeshadow and I make a line from the head up to the highest point of the arch. And I go all the way to the tail. Then I repeat on the top part of my brow, head to arch, arch to tail. And that gives me my outline. And then I simply fill sparse areas. Okay, and then when I get to the front, I kind of give myself some fake brow hairs where I don't have any. Then I flip it, and then I comb through with the spoolie to blend any harsh lines and to brush into place. Easy peasy, right? Okay, so we're gonna come back to this in a minute because I also use this for liner. But let's go ahead and do our eyeshadow look. Now this one is pretty easy. It only gives you Black Friday eyeliner and number 33 eyeshadow. So I just used this one for my brows. Let me move it over. So number 33 and a black eyeliner. Now it also uses Goldie, but it shows it up here, which is like major no-no if you have mature hooded eyes like me. That will show so much texture. So if you have young, beautiful eyelids, go for it. I'm jealous. I cannot do that in any way, shape, or form. And number 33 is a shimmer. So if you don't know, this is the shimmer. It is beautiful. And then let's go ahead and swatch Goldie. Okay, which is very similar to, I would say, Blondie. If you have Blondie eyeshadow, it's very similar. It's kind of in between, I'd say, Blondie and Gold Digger maybe. Gold Digger is a little bit darker. So very similar if you have that one already. But there's no crease color. And to me, I can't, like if I just put number 33 on my lid, you won't be able to see anything. Okay, so let me just show you. I was gonna use my finger, but I guess I'm supposed to show you guys brushes, right? So depending on how concentrated you want the color, always is how I determine what brush to use for an eyeshadow look, okay? So besides, we just went over the Multitasker and I use this for lips. This is the eye one. Again, I use this to smudge out liner, to line with this side, or if I want to press on a really pigmented shadow and I want a lot of shimmer or a lot of color, I press on with this brush always. If I want a wash, meaning I need to like carve out my crease with a matte, always use the eyeshadow brush. I always use the small end for my lower lash line, or if I want a wash of shimmer, like the least amount of color payoff, just a little shimmer, I would pick this for my lid, okay? Now, if I want more concentrated color, the smudge brush is the most dense. So this flat end you can use to press on color on the lid. This dome end, I like, it doesn't blend very well. Well, for mature eyes, this is very loose skin. I can't use this motion to blend. I have to use this motion, you know, really loose bristle brush. The more dense it is, the harder it is if you have loose skin on your eyelids, okay? So I tend to press on outer corners always with this dome in, and then sometimes I use this in just to press to help blend, but I never do buffing motions on my eyelids because that is the loosest skin on my face, okay? I'm gonna add some other shades to kind of give the look in a different way while using a matte. If you have mature hooded eyes, you need a matte to carve out the crease to give definition. You don't wanna put shimmer in a highly textured area, which is this entire crease area, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and pick up my Ride or Die, which is Sedona, just because it's in my palette, and I'm gonna pop that right there as my crease color and carve out my eye. I'm gonna flip it over and use that color to halo along the lower lash line, give myself a little bit of definition. There, okay, definition without having a line. Makes my eyes look bigger. Okay, so this is kind of my base. Literally my base for every eye look is carving out my crease so that when my eyes are open, my eyes look bigger, you can see color. Otherwise, if you have hooded eyes and you just put color on the lid, you're not gonna see the color at all, unless your eyes are closed or you're looking down, right? So now that I have this, I can either do very similar look to what the Frosted Pine was, which was just taking number 33 all over the lid, or we can switch it up. I'm gonna kind of do it a little bit more wearable for every day, but still a similar look, but maybe for more mature eyes. So I'm gonna go ahead and take number 33. Let's try it with the flat end of the smudge brush. And I'm gonna kind of tap in, tap off excess, and then just press it in the center of the lid. just like so, okay? So you're getting a little bit of a pop of color when your eyes close. Now, since the original look had this gold high up here, but I can't exactly put something super shimmery up there, I'm gonna give the same kind of look by using the color, and I'm gonna use Butterscotch, which is this warm color. It's gonna give the color of gold, and I'm just going to kind of pop it right above to warm up that brow bone. Do you see that? But since it's matte, it's not gonna increase the look of texture, which I have in that area. Okay, then we can go back to Blondie. That's not Blondie, Goldie. They're so similar. And I'm gonna get off excess. Actually, no, I'm gonna pick up the Multitasker, the small end, so we are strategic with it. So one thing you wanna do is make sure you don't get too low here. So I'm gonna pick up that illuminator and I'm gonna just pop it right under the highest part of the arch and then blend it out, okay? Since this color is so gold, if you put it on too thick, it's gonna look really yellow. So you just want that shimmer to show, not so much the yellow, okay? Pick up the Multitasker, and I'm just gonna pick up same shimmer, and I'm gonna go to that inside corner to brighten. And again, use the little end of the Multitasker on the tear duct strategically, because if I get too close or get any on the lower lash line, it's gonna show that texture I have around my eyes. Okay, last but not least, I'm gonna go in with that smudge brush dome end, and I'm gonna use a darker shade to kind of tie it all together and give me depth at this outer corner, which right now is very lacking. So we're gonna go in with Cocoa, and I'm just going to press that on and just tap to blend at the same time. And then we're gonna go right into the actual crease and give us some depth there as well. Once we kind of got the colors placed, I'm gonna go ahead and go back in with that line brush and use our Black Friday eyeliner to give depth at the lash line. Then I'm gonna go back over that with the Multitasker and Cocoa just to kind of tone it down and set it. And then a little bit on the lower lash line to bring it together. One more time with the eyeshadow brush to blend if needed. There you go, finish with mascara, and we are done. So a little take on the Frosted Pine with a little bit more of a strategic take on if you have mature or hooded eyes like I do. I think we did all the brushes in multiple ways. I showed you guys how I'd recommend using. These are the best brushes I've ever used. And if you saw my collection, you would know that was saying something. So one lucky winner is gonna get them all. I am so excited for you guys to test them out, or if you've been wanting some new brushes to try, hopefully you can snag all of them, because I feel like brushes are one thing that I'm like, having more than one is super helpful. I will put all the details for this giveaway in the drop box below the video, so make sure you look for that and don't forget to enter. If you need help with your 3D foundation or demi, or needing a match, or want me to help you verify your match and make sure that you are using the right color and the right application methods, fill out my color match questionnaire. It is also in the drop box below the video, so I'd be happy to help you out. If you have any questions or comments over any of the brushes, drop those below as well. And as always, thank you guys so much for being here. I will see you next week. Love you guys. Bye.